My name is Casey Cordes, and I'm on the affordable housing team at US Bank CDC, as well as the district council chair of ULI St. Louis. Our mission at ULI is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. At ULI St. Louis, we seek to inspire and encourage everyone to make St. Louis a better place for all. We would like to acknowledge that much of St. Louis is located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Osage Nation, Missouri and Illini Confederacy. We thank them for their hospitality and stewardship of this land. We know that Native people have long understood the genius of our natural environment. So we look forward to this program every year, enjoying a national perspective on what we might anticipate in the coming year, and also we get to hear directly from those in St. Louis who are bringing those trends to life in our region. But before we dive in, I just wanted to make a quick note that we absolutely cannot wait for the time when we can all come together again in person, more than just, well, how many people are in this room now? 10 some odd people. We would like to multiply that in person, and hopefully that happens next year. We really want you to know that ULI leadership has been thinking deeply about how we evolve our conversations, our events, and our work to drive the most impact around equitable development in St. Louis. And as you think about where you'd like to invest your time and energy in 2022, please know that we're eager to connect or reconnect about our urban plan program, the READY program, and a really exciting new health equity grant project that's really pushing us to think outside of our comfort zone. So we still have a lot going on, even though you may not have seen us in person, and we're excited to talk to you about it, hopefully next year. And you know who to call, my friend Kelly, who's right there, if anybody needs a good connection. So, okay, for today's program, how we're gonna run this, we're kind of adjusting a little bit on the fly, so I'm looking at my notes and adjusting what I plan to say very quickly. We are going to first hear from, we're gonna get the national trends first, and then we go local. So first we'll hear from Andy Warren, who's the Director of Real Estate Research for PwC on those national trends. And following Andy, we'll hear from our local panel of brilliant folks, including Michael Hamburg, founder of Pure Property Group, Stephanie Coe, who's the Deputy Chief Operating Officer with Beyond Housing, Kara Weber, who's Vice President for Business Attraction at Missouri Partnership, and moderating that conversation is Allison Gray Gunston, who's the Vice President and Midwest Region Leader for Steadfast City. And she's the lovely co-chair of our ULI Programs Committee, who has put on several amazing programs virtually this year. So I am going to hand it over, I guess, and I see Andy on screen, so it looks like everything is ready to go and we can launch the national report.
We're looking at the trends for 2022 for the first time, as we get to the end of 2021. As we put them together this year, there was kind of some overlap we thought we might be a little more through, kind of the pandemic and the impacts of that. But, the market has moved ahead and gotten in a better direction, I think. For the most part, 2021 turned out to be probably more positive than we thought it might be. We got the vaccine a little earlier than we were anticipating a year ago. Kind of got the market started in the direction that it wanted to go. So I think 2022 is going to offer some opportunities while still presenting some challenges that the market will need to deal with. But all in all, it looks like a better direction than maybe we were a year ago. Always like to start kind of looking at, kind of the sentiment of the market. And really kind of a unique situation this year. We weren't sure what this would look like when we sent out the survey because we were in such a unique situation. Obviously, 2021, was full of doing things we hadn't done before. The market going into it was a little skeptical. So the outlook was a little more tepid for this year. But for 2022, we're overly optimistic, or not, I won't say overly, but the numbers are high, very optimistic for 2022 to be a better year. And it makes sense. The economy is stronger than we anticipated that it would be. We got the vaccine earlier, economies were able to reopen a little sooner. The stimulus and the amount of money that was pumped into the economy is having an impact. In fact, to the point now where we're talking more about, possibly with inflation and some new challenges for 2022 that we maybe weren't thinking about. But all in all, people feel good. 84% of the survey respondents think that 2022 will be better than 2021. And that makes sense. It's a little bit of a rebound off of what you would have expected to be a bit of a downturn. Kind of unique, St. Louis, the outlook is even stronger from the survey respondents from the St. Louis area. 89% think the year is going to be better. And it makes sense. You kind of, when you were at, and you kind of look at that and where the strength is going forward. Now, are we too confident? It kind of raises the question when you see numbers like these, which are better than any we have seen in the emerging trends survey in the 9 years that I've been doing it. It's that, okay, is everybody so confident that we've missed something? But I don't think so, because we do have some areas that people are concerned about. We're looking at costs and availability can kind of sum up the biggest concerns, construction costs, construction labor, the availability, materials costs, material labor. Part of that may be, I'll use the term transitory for hopefully the last time, but, if the supply chain disruptions get smoothed out sometime over the next year, maybe some of the availability issues go away. It's not going to impact labor. That's something that the market's going to be dealing with and is having an impact on a number of the trends that I'll talk about as we go through this. But basically, that rising costs, shortage, difficulty obtaining materials is having an impact on inflation. Those are the things that are driving that up right now. And so the question is, what's that going to do to the real estate market? Obviously this survey was conducted mid-year and then put together as we went into the fall. But, inflation shows up as an area of moderate concern for 2022. I think if we took that survey today, it might be a little higher. We had the Federal Reserve say that they're removing the transitory label. And so we're just looking at inflation in general. So I think that's something that the market is trying to anticipate. We know that rising costs are having an impact on the bottom line and operating costs are going up. But in terms of capital investment and investment returns, what will the threat of inflation and then steps taken to maybe address that threat will have on the market? So that's going to be something that the market will be dealing with in 2022. Is it enough to offset the positive optimism that we saw? Unlikely. The optimism is driven by the fact that we think demand will come back in a number of property types, get more to a pre-pandemic level. So things look good going forward. These are just items that are going to have to be taken into account and, will have an impact on the trends as we look at 2022 and beyond. And part of that is the trends this year, as we looked at them, kind of fall into three themes. And the first one is this kind of new age of uncertainty. We've made it through the pandemic to this point. We didn't have, maybe the negative impacts worse than we had anticipated. I think, we were looking worst case scenario early on, didn't necessarily occur, although, then another point of our trends is that it's not equal everywhere. But there's going to be some things we're dealing with that maybe we haven't dealt with before. Real estate isn't, unfamiliar with uncertainty. It's an investment class and an industry that deals with uncertainty all the time. It's just some things may be a little bit different. The first one is kind of the variant concerns. A week ago, I put this report together after the Omicron variant was announced, and that was a week ago. You get to the next week and suddenly it's in the US. It wasn't in the US right after Black Friday. And, if I put this up, if I search today for, the chart of where it's at, it would be spread further throughout the country. So that's something that we don't know how long we're going to be dealing with. Somebody made the kind of the comparison that each time we have a new variant release, the reaction, both negative and initial negative reaction is a little less, and then we make the adjustment quicker and get back to kind of on our trajectory of recovery. So basically, I think, hopefully that continues and we don't have something that surprises us, but this is going to be something we're going to be dealing with because it will have an impact on the future. not going back to the way it was pre-pandemic. That's becoming a little more obvious, and more people are accepting that. Last year, we asked the question, do you think the changes you put in place for the pandemic, will they revert back to pre-pandemic activity after it's done? More people thought it would last year. This year, growing number think it's not going to. And and from a real estate perspective, that offers opportunities as we kind of begin to do business a little differently. And it offers challenges because we won't be able to just say, okay, well, we're going back to the way it were. There's going to be adjustments that are required. The one trend related to the uncertainty is the fact that the pandemic didn't hit every geographic area of the country the same way. It didn't hit every industry the same way. It didn't hit every property type the same way. So it'd be a little unrealistic to think that it's going to have that exact same impact on the recovery either. Those are going to be different. Some areas are going to recover faster. Some are almost back to pre-pandemic level. This just kind of looks at, employment in the US and in St. Louis on a pre-pandemic index to 100, and then kind of looks at the impact. St. Louis did not get hit as badly as the US economy on average. The recovery was a little faster. It kind of bounced out of it during the early reopening phase, but then it's kind of stabilized a little bit. And so it's, kind of back to that historical trend of being just a little bit below the US level. So, that's going to happen. Markets are going to be different. Some markets are recovering at a faster pace for various reasons, industry mix, demographic growth. So we're kind of seeing that. So we're going to have that change going forward. So we'll have to look at each market a little differently. Property type is a clear area where we're seeing divergence in terms of the recovery. This is the list from our survey of the more favorable outlooks down to maybe the less favorable outlooks. And you kind of see industrial, very strong, markets that are more heavily dependent on industrial investment doing very well. We changed the way we shop. That had a dramatic impact on industrial. Alternatives, which life science, data centers, rose up to the number 2 in terms of outlook, in terms of survey respondents. And that was something new. There'd always been conversation around alternatives. Life science in particular, which has a direct impact on St. Louis as being one of the centers of life science investment. People are more interested in that going forward. Can everybody invest in it? No, it's a very specialized property type, takes expertise that not everyone has, takes, you have to have the infrastructure to support it. So that's going to be something that people are looking at. And I think that's part of capital wanting to get into the market. The housing market, very different across the country. We've had single family home sales at unprecedented levels in terms of the amount of supply that's available. Don't usually see that during a recession, but we did during this cycle. Single family rental is gaining more interest as people look for alternatives to provide affordable housing. Same with workforce housing. In the hospitality market, hotels, vacation hotels, places where people could get away, bounce back faster than anticipated. Once we got a vaccine, once people felt safe going out again, they decided they wanted to travel. But on the other side, convention, business travel, it's not back to where it was. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like going forward. There's different ideas. I think business travel is going to recover. People will begin to travel again, but they may do it a little more judiciously. They may take advantage of technologies like we're using today to kind of replace some kind of types of business travel. But it's going to come back, but that's a 2022 thing we'll be watching. Office, we're going to talk about in terms of one of our trends, but on the side where you have question marks around CBD and suburban office, we have medical office, which is doing very well. And then finally, retail, a sector definitely dramatically impacted by the pandemic. You had the essential, non-essential argument, and then now that's kind of corrected. But, the retailers that we talked to this year, for all of the challenges they faced during the pandemic, the outlook is probably more optimistic than it has been for 5 years. And that's simply because they took care of some problems that might have lingered into the future. They've been pulled forward which was something we saw a lot of during this pandemic. And those problems have been fixed. So we feel good about kind of moving forward with new things like buy online, pick up curbside, and kind of mixing that omni-channel method of selling that we've been talking about for several years. But expertise was gained during the pandemic, new techniques developed. So I think retail has a little more favorable outlook than maybe it did 2 years ago. Capital, this was another trend, is that the capital for real estate continues to want in. Everybody wants to get invested in real estate. A lot of capital was raised at the onset of the pandemic to take advantage of distress, which never actually really materialized to a significant way. That capital is still interested in getting into the market. This kind of illustrated by the kind of an index of property sales transactions. We see the initial drop during 2020 when it was difficult to transact because you couldn't go out and look at properties, you couldn't travel, do those types of things that we are part of our natural transaction process. Once that began to ease, the amount of money going back in, it went to flight to quality, a little more certainty there, wanted to go to the right properties. But then it's also looking at alternatives. And that kind of goes back to our discussion about life science earlier, is a lot of money was invested in some of these, what we call alternative investments. And over close to 20% in 2021 right now have been invested in kind of these sectors. Some are a little more familiar than others, medical office, student housing. But then we have the new ones that are rising, like self-storage and data centers. Senior housing has been popular all along, and then R&D, which kind of fits into that life science category. People are looking to place money. So I think in 2022 and beyond, we'll begin to have a conversation around, are these core property types? And when do they become more core property types? If they get identified as a core property type, then you begin to see, other sources of capital that will be able to go into them, ones that have to kind of track kind of that metric for their performance. So it looks like our real estate universe is going to continue to get bigger. That's good in terms of money spreading across the country, because there'll be more opportunities for markets to kind of be centers of excellence for these property types. Next theme that kind of came out this year was flexibility. And that was really born out of the idea that we could work remotely. We could live anywhere and work due to the remoteness that was afforded us. And people began to like it. Employers found out that it worked. People were productive. Employees liked it because, they didn't have the commute. They found that they could identify their time a little better, maybe a little more of a work-life balance. But it doesn't really mean that we're not going to go back to the office. And that's kind of the first trend out of this is, do we go back to the office? Do we stay 100% remote? And this has been a very evolving discussion through the emerging trends over the last 2 years. And it's changed. It's changed from the initial success of remote work to maybe the negatives of it, as people got burned out on being in it. They missed being part of the office. Kind of the mental health issues of people being isolated kind of began to rise up. But through our conversations this year, I think we've kind of come to the idea that 3 is really kind of the magic number. If we talk to the side that's very much in favor of remote work, well, they think you should probably be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. You talk to the side that feels like everyone should be in the office in terms of collaboration and education and absorbing culture. 3 to 4 days a week, is what they think people should be in the office. And kind of look at the survey results as what people think, how many people will be in the office at least 3 days a week. You kind of see it's a little different. St. Louis is a little lower than the national responses in terms of people greater than 75%. And I think that is a mix of kind of the industry breakdown in an economy, kind of the arduousness of the commute, and just kind of how it all fits together. And so we're kind of seeing deviations from this. So I think some markets will probably be more adoptive of kind of this more remote work. And St. Louis looks like it might be in that category. Kind of change in office space needs, then if people are only in the office part of the time, how's that going to change how much office space we need? And obviously, most people feel like it will decrease. And in this category, St. Louis matches the nation of 56% think we'll need less office. 31% stay the same. And this is another category where we have good arguments on both sides. If I don't have everybody in the office, then I don't need as much space. Or if I have people in the office and they want to be more distanced because of the new norm of kind of health and wellness and safety coming out of a health crisis, then maybe I need a little more space. Or I'm keeping the same amount of space and I'm using it differently. I configure it differently. What didn't change is this idea that it has to be the right space. Yeah, it needs to be space that entices people to come to the office. So the amenity war that we've talked about isn't over. It's just maybe changed focus a little bit. And so we're going to design space to do the tasks that people should be doing when they're in their office. So maybe there's more individual collaboration space, more space that will allow people to be to collaborate with people that aren't in the office. So you have more video rooms and things that work together with like that. But office is going to change. This is going to be an evolutionary process over the next 2 to 3 years as we find out what works. We may stick with this model may be great, or we may find that we want to go back to the way it was before. Population growth by time period. This is really around the idea that if we can work anywhere, can we live anywhere? And last year we talked about the Great American Move, but it's been heightened now by the fact that we had 5 million people drop out of the labor force during the pandemic. Now we've had some come back, but we're also seeing competition for labor from other areas, people starting their own businesses, maybe outsourcing more work. We may be, we've seen industrial providers like Amazon and hire thousands of people. That's taken people away from other traditional areas. So we're really kind of in a function where it's going to be important to attract population to keep the economy growing. And this just kind of compares St. Louis historical and projected population growth to the US. And, the US population growth has slowed, national or international immigration is down. And we look going forward, St. Louis has been a little slower growing economy. It's going to have to get back to being, a little more competitive to try and draw people in. Part of that may happen because people can be remote workers, so they may come to the area anyway, but it's going to be a greater focus than we even anticipated over the last 2 or 3 years. Kind of the top markets that we've seen, highly weighted to the Southeast, a combination of costs, kind of attractiveness to labor. A lot of people move to these areas when they were working remotely, some will stay. So that list really hasn't changed. It's been very similar over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. A little bit of a difference was Phoenix is number 3 this year, kind of a result of people leaving California. So we are seeing that idea that we talked about last year of people moving around the country. The one thing that is very clear this year as we put the numbers together for the rankings is they continue to get tighter and tighter. We have this kind of group that is at the top. We have kind of a group that makes up the bottom. And then we kind of have our middle tier where everyone is very interested. We're finding groups that are looking at investing everywhere. And that kind of puts St. Louis at 51, which is kind of in the middle, which is actually towards the upper end of that middle section of markets. And, kind of the trends that are going on are kind of having an impact. Lingering concerns over going back to the gateway cities are offering opportunities for other cities to keep workers that had moved there. A technology base is very good. People are looking for technology centers around the country. And there's interest in suburban and remote work locations. If you're allowing people to work from anywhere, markets that have healthy suburbs are seeing a benefit as people look to kind of move the work locations closer to where the people live. But, as all markets in the Midwest will continue to struggle with this kind of idea of slower population growth. It's affordability. Another thing that may drive this idea that remote work is here to stay is that you can put up pockets of operations across the country. Compare the cost of some of these core occupations in St. Louis to the rest of the market, very favorable, looks very good, kind of holds up there. So I think companies are now viewing not just labor force where they're at, they're looking at labor force being a national, maybe even a global situation, and trying to attract people and seeing some of the benefits, which is, perhaps paying lower costs for that labor. Final theme for the trends this year was kind of recognition. And these are trends that aren't new. They're things that we've talked about in emerging trends. It's things that we'll talk about, I'm sure, for the next 2 or 3 years, but they were looked at in a little different lens this year in terms of what the pandemic did, reactions to the pandemic, and how it kind of showed up. And the first one is kind of the housing prices. Housing prices didn't go away because we had a pandemic. We saw, eviction moratoriums. We saw money made available for rent forbearance and rent assistance. Kind of pointed out the idea that it's a supply issue. And this is from the Terwilliger Institute at ULI, and this is attainability, the percent of housing that's attainable to somebody making a household of 4 earning 120% of the average mean income in a city. And you got to see, St. Louis compares very favorably to kind of those top 10 markets. And some of those top 10 markets, which were once very affordable, are struggling. You look at Nashville, which is the #1 market this year, only 44.9% of their housing is attainable to people in this 120% mean income. That could be a problem at some point. So we're going to see kind of affordability of housing, and the idea that if it's a supply problem, we have to figure out a way to get more supply, but do it in an affordable way, which is difficult when you look at the idea of the rising costs that we talked about earlier. So it's going to be policy, it's going to be new technologies, there's going to be a lot of tools that we'll have to bring to bear to kind of address this problem. Kind of the following is retrofitting cityscapes. We saw downtown areas kind of adopt to the idea when they couldn't operate in the normal fashion because of the pandemic with, outdoor dining, closing streets to make them more attractive. Kind of the idea of suburbanizing the urban core. Okay, I want to have some of these benefits that you get in the suburbs, but I want them in the urban area. People are going back to the gateway cities. There's no question about that. You look at the apartment data, and the window is closed to get in a bargain on an apartment in, say, in New York. The attraction is there, but as people go back, they also may go back to the near suburbs. So we're looking at the idea, can infrastructure help, maybe regionalization, where you think more of an MSA as, being a central theme. You want to increase the ability of people to live in one area of the city and work in another, and do it in kind of a fashion that is both convenient, affordable, and lowers carbon footprint. These are just the categories of infrastructure spending that the survey respondents thought would have the most positive impact on real estate. And since we now have an infrastructure spending bill, signed and into law, it's good to see that we are kind of addressing some of those as we go forward. Not something that will happen immediately, but something that will happen over the next 2 or 3 years. Finally, climate change. As we were in the pandemic, we watched as, the Northwest had heat domes, the wildfires across the West. We had flooding in the South from the hurricanes all the way up to the Northeast corridor. And the idea that we need to address this or need to start thinking about it became more relevant in people's conversations. For the first time in the survey, we asked about how respondents are thinking about ESG principles when they operate or invest. 82% say they are. The largest reason they are is because they think it's the right thing to do. 52% are doing it for risk management. 48% are doing it because of investor or tenant requirements. I think those numbers will go up as ESG is more widely adopted. But the conversation around, we're talking about it, we're doing this maybe for insurance costs, so the hard and fast moves by people are a little more limited. I think they will increase as we set some standards so people understand what to measure, how to report it, and how to get it to a point where it is impacting the bottom line as well as doing the right thing. So we've taken steps to that. It's almost as if we went from that's the next generation's problem to that's now our problem, and we're going to start working on it. Well, that's the trends for 2022. As I said, kind of an idea that we are very optimistic about the year ahead. I think there were some tremendous thoughts that the industry kind of shared with us as we looked at the next year. So it looks like a year that, even though there are problems, I think that optimism that we're showing is warranted, and it'll offer great opportunity going forward. So thank you, and now I'll throw it back to Allison.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Andy for that great overview of the emergency and insight into the next year. Obviously, I think tech issues are going to be one of the things that is growing for 2022. Hopefully, also flexibility on dealing with those tech issues. Thank you everyone for joining us for a few years now, and I know I'm a presenter and a panelist, so thank you all for your time. So I work at the consulting firm people from these industries, and I've learned that the importance of having these strong organizations is so important for our region, and having those strong partners in development, in economic development, is such a big deal. So all the people here today are great assets to our region, and I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. So I will do a quick intro for the group, and then each of them will have a chance to talk about their organizations, and then we will jump into the discussion questions. So first we have Sarah Weber, who is Vice President of Business Recruitment at Missouri Partnership. We have Stephanie Coe, Deputy Chief Operating Officer at Beyond Housing. And then we will end with Michael Hamburg, who is founder at Peer Property Group. And now I will pass it on to Kara.
Great, thank you. So I work for Missouri Partnership, but I want to tell you guys a little bit about my background about Missouri Partnership in case you're not familiar. So as Allison mentioned, I work for Missouri Partnership now. I'm there maybe just less than a month. I recently came from Greater St. Louis, Inc. Before that, I had the chance to work with Allison's colleague, Doug Rasmussen, doing site selection consulting work, and had worked for Missouri Partnership previously for 6 years before that in a different role. So Missouri Partnership's mission is to help improve the state of Missouri by bringing new jobs and investment. And the way that we do that is primarily through business recruitment. So we're trying to attract new facilities, new expansions to the state of Missouri. And we're primarily doing that with companies that are not are a public-private entity. We're contracted with the Hawthorne Foundation, and we work very closely with the Missouri Department of Economic Development in order to deliver economic development services throughout the state of Missouri. Hawthorne Foundation is a 501c6, I believe, organization that's supported by business leaders throughout the state. Of economic development, I'll try to hear a lot. I'm just not sure about the alphabet soup of economic development organizations, so I want to try to make it a little bit more clear. Working on a project, you need some help from the economic development community. I'm more than happy to play traffic control. Give me a call. I will let you know who to call. I'll call my former colleague, Lori Becklenburg at Greater St. Louis, Inc. She also is going to be very helpful in the St. Louis region. We'll get you to the right people. So let's see. I want to go to the slide before. It's like it maybe is. There's like multiple, it's like got animations on it.
It's not working.
Okay, so we'll just skip that. that, let's talk a little bit about the program areas that Missouri Partnership does. We've got essentially 3 teams, and think of it like a sales funnel. So Missouri Partnership does marketing for the state of Missouri. That's very broad. We're trying to reach out to companies. We're trying to reach out to site selection consultants to try to get projects in the door. A little bit more targeted, we have a business development team. A gentleman by the name of Dennis Pruitt is going out and really trying to connect directly with companies. And then I am on the project management team, which is really working with those companies and site selection consultants. Once they are looking at Missouri, I'm trying to help find them, real estate, trying to help with incentives, really any piece of the site selection process, we're trying to deliver those services. And we work very closely with local, regional economic developers and the Missouri Department of Economic Development to do that. So really, we're just trying to help with any aspect that we can to get a company to choose the state of Missouri. Just a quick slide to show you where the jobs are locating. This is for the last 5 years. You can see that Missouri Partnership has had success recruiting throughout the state. We see a lot of those locating in the major urban areas, and a lot of that's driven by available talent and available real estate. I have more data on that we could talk about later, or feel free to email me and I can give you a little bit more insight on all of that. Just a few of the more recent wins for Missouri Partnership. The most recent one is American Foods Group, which is a beef processing facility. I'm personally really excited about this. It's located in unincorporated Warren County. It's really great for the ag community, and Missouri cattle producers are going to be able to bring their animals to the American Foods Group facility, and it's just great for farmers and great for the region. Huge investment, lots of jobs. You can see here on the slide, there's several other great wins in the St. Louis region. Gateway Studios, that's a really interesting, you may have seen some news about that, really interesting operation in Chesterfield where bands will be able to come and practice for their world tours. Ostara is a fertilizer company, Deli Star, of course, making deli meats. Accenture Federal Services, there was news this week about they're launching an apprenticeship program. It's really fantastic. They're hiring a lot of tech workforce here. Avocado, a tech company that's doing marketing, I believe, really exciting. And then you see there's a few other recent wins throughout the state. Chewy Inc. As a distribution center for Chewy in Belton, Missouri, which is near Kansas City, with prepared foods, preparing different meat products in Columbia, and Carlisle Construction Materials in Sikeston. So, Missouri, we've had a lot of success, and it's been really exciting. And this is just a quick slide on projects open, so you can kind of see this is the flow of activity. Things are really busy right now, hence Missouri Partnership expanding the project management team, which I am now on. And you can kind of see the dip in April 2020 when the pandemic first hit, but activity is really great considering that we are still in a pandemic. And I think that'll be my last slide, but I will be happy to answer questions later on.
Okay, thank you, Kara. We're going to pass this on to Stephanie now.
Thank you so much. I'm Stephanie Coe. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer of Beyond Housing, and I'm here to provide a nonprofit community developer perspective. And we are a mission-based organization. Our organization's mission is to strengthen families and transform communities to create a stronger, more prosperous, and equitable St. Louis. And so we started as a housing organization, but we home is more than a house. Home is everything that makes it a thriving community. So to make a larger impact, we focus not only on housing, but also, go ahead to the next slide, education, economic development, health, and jobs. And for today, we're going to talk specifically about housing and economic development. And so we are a place-based organization. So focus primarily in the Northern School District. It is also known as the 24-1 community. And that's because there are 23 currently, previously 24 municipalities municipalities that make up that school district. They have one collective vision, and we were actually invited into this community during the height of the foreclosure crisis. This area was really hit hard by the foreclosure crisis. A lot of the municipalities were working to address it, but recognized they couldn't do it on their own. So they asked us to serve as a facilitator, but that discussion really elevated to not only talk about foreclosure and housing, but also the school district and many other community building activities. And so since then, this community has approached building has received national recognition by the White House as well as the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the school district continues to serve as a grounding force for the community as well. And so in terms of the way that Beyond Housing decides to do our work and how we go about our projects, including real estate projects, our approach is called Ask, Align, and Act. So essentially, we ask community members what they would like to see in the community. We then align that vision with resources, and then we implement that vision to the best of our ability. And it is a very circular approach, constantly are asking and asking again. This is one example, the 24-1 Community Vision Report. So when we first started working in this community, we worked on the first comprehensive community-wide plan. That was around 2010 or so, and then starting in 2019, we decided to go back to the community. We engaged over 1,000 residents to really update that plan and come up with new priorities. And so these are the priorities here that the vision came up with, and the new collective vision is neighborly communities, invested families, and successful businesses. And so that is something that we really use to inform our work. Something that we hear a lot from in the community is that need for that quality, affordable housing. And I know that was referenced in the presentation before this. So Beyond Housing has over 500 rental units throughout St. Louis County, the majority of which are in Normandy School District. And since our transition to become a place-based organization, we have also decided to invest any future real estate development, housing development solely in the Normandy School District as well. And so in terms of our housing work, something unique about our housing is any resident in our housing program is connected to a resource specialist. And so that means they can work on various goals, whether it's around home ownership, educational, career goals. And then they also have that resource specialist to help navigate any resources around housing stability. We have a home ownership program that we are able to connect residents to. So since 2019, since during the pandemic, actually, we've been able to transition 20 residents, 20 families into home ownership, which is super exciting. And we also provide home ownership services for the greater St. Louis community as well. We also provide financial assistance, rent and mortgage assistance to existing renters in the community. We provide a home repair program as well for existing homeowners. So really trying to not only develop new housing, but support residents. And then we've also done work around code enforcement, and we also currently facilitate a land trust to provide alternative pathways to homeownership as well. And so in terms of our economic development, like I mentioned before, while we started with housing, we received a lot of feedback that there is really more to the thriving community than quality housing. And so really getting a lot of feedback of being able to go to local services, be able to go to local entertainment, sit down restaurants, grocery stores. And so one of our first developments was actually bringing the Save-A-Lot grocery store as well as Midwest Bank Center and Rosie Shields Senior Apartment. And the reason why this development was able to work is because of being able to provide both housing as well as commercial development. That was something that was really enticing to our partners as well as to our financial partners. And since then, we've been able to expand this work. We built a movie theater, which we currently own and operate. We also brought in Avinia Healthcare as well as BJC Behavioral Health. So being able to address some of the health needs in the community. And we've also brought a restaurant and we've developed some additional office space as well. So we're super excited to continue to bring more economic development, specifically in the Peachville area. But we know that this service is not just Peachville, but the greater 24-1 community as well. And so what I'm really excited to share is our recent project that's actually just opened in the last few months. And this is Commons. And so if you are located in St. Louis, I really encourage you to check this out. It's right at the corner of Page and Ferguson and Pagedale. And so this is a mixed-use development. There is a food hall. It has currently 2 restaurants, but soon will be 3. And in addition to that, there is a boutique, there is a fitness center. Upstairs, there's a culinary job training center as well, in addition to event space and a home and health therapy center. So we're super excited about this, especially because while our previous investments in real estate work was super exciting, this is one that's really able to support local entrepreneurs and specifically Black-owned businesses as well. All of the businesses located in this facility are Black-owned businesses, with the exception of the nonprofits. And the nonprofit is going to be working alongside these businesses to be able to provide a pipeline of culinary jobs to the area as well. And so I wanted to highlight 2 projects that are currently in development, planning development. So we submitted these 2 projects to Missouri Housing Development Commission and hope to hear positive news soon, but we'll see. You know, it's very competitive. But the reason why we're excited about these proposed developments is because it really shows this comprehensive approach. And so these are housing developments that would be located within walking distance from all of that commercial development I just shared. So Lincoln Square would be 40 units of multi-family housing, a mix of 2-bedroom garden apartments, as well as 3-bedroom townhomes, a mix of incomes as well, and really addressing the need for 2-bedroom apartments, which we typically have not been able to provide. This is also located in the former school district building sites, which unfortunately we had to demolish because it wasn't able to be rehabilitated, but we're really excited to, in the future, hopefully be able to revitalize the site and really bring some additional community assets. In addition to that, we've also a proposal for Facial Town Center Homes. This is a single family development. It would be infill, so really focused on existing vacant parcels and commercial developments. And these will be a mix of 3- and 4-bedroom single family.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to share, so just to continue where we left off, really our comprehensive approach is focusing on being able to bring that housing development along with our economic development, build on existing community assets as well. Something else we've done is we're also strategic, building off of being able to support existing homeowners with their home repair. So the map that I shared also highlights some of the investments we've done around home repair. So finally, I just wanted to share something that we recently helped facilitate this past year, which is the 24-1 Master Land Use and Economic Development Plan. So while I'm super excited about all the work Beyond Housing has been able to do, we recognize that we should not be the only developer here. We don't want to be. We really want to be able to bring some additional investment partners, developers into the community, but in a way that is community informed and community approved. And so that's really where this plan comes in. We were able to work with PGAV as well as RISE Community Development to be able to develop a comprehensive plan that used a lot of public engagement with our local elected officials, as well as with residents in the community to really see what they would wanted to see their neighborhoods look like, what kind of economic development they wanted to see as well. The super exciting thing about this plan is that it really brings together all of the different municipalities. So rather than every single municipality putting their own plan, which is very, very expensive, this really allows them to not only have some cost savings by putting a comprehensive plan together, but really recognize the importance of what happens in the neighborhood municipality really affects yours as well. And so knowing that not every single municipality needs a grocery store, but maybe having one in the next municipality will be beneficial to theirs. So that's a really exciting thing about that comprehensive approach. And we're looking forward to being able to help implement that plan in the future.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And I also love that I'm off camera, which is really great for me. So I'm gonna pass this off to Michael so he can talk about what they're working on for Pure Property Group.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you ULI and Steadfast and everyone for putting this together and inviting me to be part of this. I'm Michael Hamburg with Pure Property Group. Just a little bit on my background and kind of what our company is focused on previously and then currently as well and into the future. I started Pure Property Group about 5 years ago, really with a market rate real estate and real estate development background. A lot of sourcing, financing, and structuring large real estate portfolio transactions around the country. And then underwriting primarily apartment projects, multifamily projects throughout the country, and then specifically in St. Louis for the last couple of years prior to starting Pure Property Group. My last stop prior to starting Pure Property Group was at a tax credit investment company. So really honed in on federal, state, and then local incentive packages that are available to developers to be able to structure transactions that otherwise might not be feasible without those tools. And really went around the country and was looking at other projects in various markets and realized there's just, in my opinion, a big hole in the quality and supply of luxury product that we have in the St. Louis market, and product that is well amenitized with current standards that I think you see around the country in these large scale communities. And so really started Pure Property Group with the goal of kind of advancing the ball in an urban setting, and developing and providing these well amenitized, large scale, primarily multifamily communities, mixed use communities in these urban walkable kind of live, work, play type of environments. Initially that was utilizing the historic tax credit program. So my mission was really figuring out ways to save historic buildings while providing this more amenitized luxury housing model in the area. So did a 164 unit conversion of an old printing manufacturing company in the Grove neighborhood, right at Tower Grove and Vandevender. That one was completed early 2019. And has leased up partially through the pandemic, which is a little bit of a scare, but we were able to get there and stabilize. And that one has been performing well. And then did a project called Steel Coat Lofts, which was 33 units over by St. Louis University and SSM's new hospital. And then a second phase in that same neighborhood called Steel Coat Crossing, which was another a smaller 15 unit historic tax credit rehab of an old warehouse that was vacant in the neighborhood. And then really due to changes in the historic tax credit program and just need and different land availability and wanting to deliver some amenities that couldn't be retrofit into some of these smaller spaces, started shifting into the ground up new construction world. So I'm under construction on a 105 unit project that neighbors these two steel coat buildings over by SLU's hospital that I mentioned a moment ago. And then we are finishing construction on a 214 unit project in Maryland Heights called the Flats at Dorset Ridge, actually today. So kind of shifted away from the city model or 100% city model and started realizing that the same thought that was being applied to some of these urban markets that maybe hadn't seen the supply and the well amenitized luxury large scale housing, I was seeing some of those same holes in St. Louis County and some more suburban markets as well. There had been developments that were garden style, multiple building type of projects, but not really that urban feel, single building, mid-rise, structured parking, walkable type of product. So that's what we're delivering in Maryland Heights, and then have another one in Chesterfield that we're about to kick off next week. That's a similar model, a 266 unit mid-rise, very highly amenitized luxury type of housing product. And so really we've started to kind of take a step back and look at these little pockets in different parts of St. Louis that have a lot of commercial demand drivers and other demand drivers, but have really been ignored from both an affordable housing perspective, but also luxury and highly amenitized housing perspective. Lastly, we've kind of continued to try to develop this steel coat neighborhood that I mentioned over by SLU's new hospital. We recently announced a fourth phase of that development that we're very excited about, which will be a 198 unit apartment building with a 70,000 square foot Target retail store on the ground floor, and then parking below it. It's kind of our anchor for that neighborhood. And so we're just really excited about how, I know I mentioned the first piece was 33 units and then 15 units and then 105 units. And we've been able to kind of stack these different pieces and different phases of that neighborhood together over time. So we're really excited about about where that's heading and just generally for our region. I think there's just a ton of exciting activity going on, and we had a lot of excitement going into the pandemic. And personally was very concerned when things hit. I'm sure we all were, on what our future was and how it was going to impact the growth trajectory that our region was on. And I think there's been a lot of good, nimble responses, and we've seen a lot of strong trends from coastal capital, still interested and even more interested now in coming to this kind of stable St. Louis market, and seeing a lot of opportunities with a lot of public and private investment in our region. So again, excited to be part of this and happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. So even with our tech issues, we are exactly on time, which is really great. So we have about 30 minutes for questions. We have some prepared, but if you have questions that you want to throw into the chat box, we will be monitoring that and we'll be able to hit a couple of those at the end of the session. So first question is, from each of your own perspective, what has been the biggest change in your industry over the past year? You can start on my side.
Sure. I think for us, it's been a big shift in the type of projects, the industries that we're seeing. I would say that we used to see a lot more financial and professional services projects, because the world is changing, because those jobs aren't necessarily tied to one facility in one place. It's sort of just changed what we're seeing. What we're seeing a huge increase in is food projects, food producing. You saw the list of wins that I was sharing. We've got a lot on there that are related to food. And we're also seeing, relating back to what Andy said, a lot of new life science projects. And then I would say the other sort of shift is that for those financial services, professional services, more office-based industries, we're sort of having to adjust how we look at incentives, because those are not tied to one specific location. So it's changing, but activity is really good. So that's very positive.
In our case, I think just the housing scarcity, the housing need, and that demand has really, that's really been something that we've noticed. We've always had a lot of demand for our rental housing program, and we always have a waiting list. But now not only do we have a really long waiting list, but we also don't even have any available units, because everybody is mostly interested in staying in place on the end. The good thing is people, when they are moving, are generally moving because they're moving into home ownership or something else in a positive light. But in terms of having that availability, that's really a challenge, and that's why we're hoping we can bring some additional units on in the future, but that will still be only a very small scale solution. Something else that I think we've noticed is just having that flexibility. So whether for our residential tenants, but also our commercial tenants, knowing that this is a really hard time, and even for some of our business owners, having some flexibility and sometimes even providing some of that same supportive services that we have for our rental residents for our commercial tenants as well.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of things evolve over the last year and a half through pandemic, and just trickle down effects of that, and whether that's interest rates, inflation type of consequences. But I think the biggest one and the overarching one that we're still seeing are just supply shortage issues and concerns. Over last summer, there was a lot of concerns primarily over lumber, and that was the big driver for a lot of our budget busts, I would say, and a lot of concerns over underwriting new projects as well. That has now evolved to be virtually every single product that we're acquiring, and we're seeing 20 to 30% increases on construction budgets overall. So it's really, I think, driven a really long, hard look at projects in the pipeline and trying to underwrite, if we wait 6 months or 12 months, are these issues going to start to work themselves out a little bit and potentially not go back to a pre-pandemic level, but something that's closer to that, or in the middle, that things are a little bit more stabilized.
Okay, and so we've kind of talked about a lot of challenges that we've seen in the last year, but I also think that throughout COVID and throughout 2021, there have been a lot of new opportunities that have also popped up. So what opportunities are you most excited about for 2022? And we can start from Michael and go the other way.
Sure. Yeah, I think, there definitely are a lot of positives too. I know I mentioned, interest rates being low from my perspective and, rental rates rising in some respects. All of those things have helped offset some of those negatives and some of those supply issues and cost consequences that we've seen. But I think generally I'm excited about the growth and a lot of employment that our region has started to attract. And, specifically, from my perspective, being able to attract a tenant like Target Corporation to come into a midtown urban location in the city of St. Louis, looking at Topgolf, which has kind of half been announced coming in down the street from us, the hospitals, MLS, just there's a lot of very exciting developments that have been Foundry just opening up. There's a lot of exciting developments that have either been under construction, announced, in different phases of planning that I think within the next 12 months, we're either going to be able to step foot inside of them or see them become very, very real. So it's exciting to see.
And for us, we're excited for opportunities to hopefully be able to develop future affordable housing. Again, we have some applications in, so hopefully we'll hear some positive news. But even if not, we have some other approaches that we're going to be trying out in terms of developing some additional affordable housing units in the area. And then I think something else is another opportunity. It's just really pushing ourselves to be more innovative, especially when it comes to our commercial spaces. Just in this past year, we've done some different things in terms of trying to activate our spaces and just getting people a bit more aware and excited about some of the commercial properties that we have.
I think I want to answer on behalf of the St. Louis region instead of the entire state of Missouri, which I have plenty to be excited about for the entire state, but for this audience being in St. Louis, I think one of the things that I'm really excited about in 2022 is the organization that I was just recently employed with, Greater St. Louis Inc. This is a really great opportunity for the economic development community to have come together and be able to do some great things for the region. I'll specifically cite the 2030 jobs plan and the strategies that are laid out to improve this region. I think that there's going to be a lot of exciting things to come in 2022 and beyond for the next 10 years and beyond that. Sort of echoing what Michael said, there's been so much wonderful urban development and I see that continuing. And I'm really proud to support it from the state level.
Okay. So I think that people within the real estate development world are starting to realize that community development goes hand in hand with successful real estate development projects. So can you all speak towards how your work is part of a larger community ecosystem? Anyone can go.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in there. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm a big believer of, the rising tide lifts all boats type of philosophy. And I think we've seen that, St. Louis is in a lot of ways a big city, but a small town. And, there's the select number of urban developers, as an example, that historically have been involved in St. Louis. And fortunately, that list is growing, which is great. And there's a lot of fresh young developers, I think, that are jumping into that world. But I think the collaboration side of that is crucial. So, understanding what the Lawrence Group is delivering with the Foundry and what Green Street's working on with the Armory and working with St. Louis University and their 353 redevelopment organization on what their image is for the area and what their students are really looking for. And that applies to obviously every region and every organization. But I think that collaborative work together to make sure, we're not stepping on each other and we're really delivering something that's sustainable, that kind of meets the demand that's out there is something really unique that I think we're seeing right now with the majority of the projects that are going.
And then I would just share, that, essential to our approach is that community development approach. And so be able to continue to work with residents, with elected officials, with other community organizations to really identify what those needs are in the community. Everything that we do, we really try to align with not only the existing community plan, the existing master land use and economic development plan, but we also try to engage residents, as projects develop as well. So just making sure that there is really that ongoing feedback and relationship with community.
For business attraction, we are frequently working as a team with local economic developers, regional economic developers, but ultimately what we hope that our work does, business attraction is just going to be a small part of the jobs that are created in the state of Missouri. But my former boss, Steve Johnson, has referred to it as the flywheel. that can help some of this other development. And I believe that it adds a lot of excitement to attract new companies and new jobs to the region. But ultimately, I think that when we're attracting these jobs, what we really want is a better life for the people that are fulfilling those jobs, so that they can have better housing, so that they can have expendable income to spend at Target. Those are the things that we're really looking for.
Yeah, so there is a ton of excitement about Target coming into Midtown. So this is the area you've mentioned as SLU's campus, the School of Medicine, the new hospital, SSM Health, and Cardinal Glenn. So really, it's been ripe for development for years. So Michael, do you think that we were able to attract Target because they are changing their growth plan and their approach to urban areas? Or was it a change within St. Louis or perhaps within St. Louis developers that actually attracted them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I think the answer is probably equal of both. I think from a Target perspective, they had rolled out these urban, small format stores, which small format is interesting because it can range from 20,000 square feet up to 85,000 square feet, which in my opinion is a pretty large store. But it's a little bit of a different format than their larger 150,000 square foot locations. So they might have all product types in these smaller stores, but not as many brands of the same product. So they're still able to accomplish everything that you could find at a normal Target, but not as many variations in the actual product lines. So I think them rolling out and seeing that demand for urban, walkable, smaller types of locations was key for this location to be of interest. But I think the bigger part is just the St. Louis region in this Midtown area. The university had targeted Target for a very long time as something that they really wanted as an anchor to serve retail in the area. And I think, there had been years of courtship there trying to get them interested. And I think it finally was successful now because of everything else that we're seeing going on in the area with the hospital, with MLS and Foundry and a lot of other projects that we could mention, even WashU, Cortex. All of that trickles down and is, I think, part of the circle that will, be patrons that will come to that store. So I think what was going on in the region and that sales pitch on that demand and also kind of the retail desert that had been grand for so long. I think all of those things were pretty identifiable for Target to be interested.
Awesome. Okay. With COVID making more people stay at home and work from home more often, the reality of geographic-based health inequity has become even more clear. So for Stephanie, with things like the new tree canopy program in North St. Louis County, how has Beyond Housing taken steps to help communities and developers focus on building a more equitable St. Louis?
So in regards to the tree canopy assessment, essentially the purpose of that was really to identify what is the current tree canopy in this particular area, the Normandy School District, and how does it compare to the rest of St. Louis County. And really, it really shows here are some areas to really prioritize in order to improve the tree canopy, knowing that that is such an important part of our landscape, of our environment, to be able to be in a safe environment, to be in a healthy environment. And so we were able to also combine these efforts with our community health initiative around asthma to make sure that people really understood the importance of trees. Sometimes people in the community see trees as a liability, but we've been doing a lot of education to show, hey, this is how it can actually also be an asset. We've really seen a shift, a lot of community ownership over that as well. And in terms of how this also relates just to our general work around equitable development, again, I think at the core of it is really making sure that people are really speaking to the community and speaking to those priorities, and really also just investing and recognizing past harms. So a lot of the reasons why there may be some challenges in the community have been because of previous policies around redlining, around predatory lending, around restrictive covenants. That's a big reason why this area is so fragmented in the first place. So it's really important to be able to both recognize previous past harms and then look at new policies, new investments to be able to rectify some of this as well.
So Kara, you've been in the regional development realm since 2010. So can you talk about how regional development and maybe the approach to the incentive process has changed since then?
Sure. When I started in 2010, we were still pulling out of the Great Recession. Economic development, business attraction looked a lot different than it does today. We were definitely, I don't want to say that we were more desperate for projects, but it definitely felt that way. And really it's what brought me into economic development in the first place, was trying to secure those jobs for our community, because at the time we were hurting. Since then, we've had some new tools added to the toolbox. Missouri's main incentive program is called Missouri Works. It's a jobs tax credit program, but it's actually retained withholdings. I think the biggest change right now, the biggest change from when that program was established to now is, as I referenced earlier, we're seeing that jobs aren't necessarily locating to one facility, and the definition of full-time jobs for the program is reporting to a facility more than 50% of the time. So administratively, we have to be able to communicate how jobs can qualify, even if they're not reporting to a single facility more than 50% of the time. But the upside of Missouri Works is that it's a really great tool. We're really glad to have it in the toolbox. There's some discretionary incentives that can go along with that, and it's been helpful in recruiting businesses to the state of Missouri.
So I know, I think our previous program was about housing affordability. But that was also one of the major trends that we had for this Emerging Trends program. And I wanted to pull in some numbers that we have. So a recent study by Community Builders Network of Metro St. Louis says that the city and the county needs about 35,000 affordable apartments for lower income people. And according to the St. Louis Development Corp, in an article in the St. Louis Business Journal, there are currently just 1,500 multifamily units under construction in St. Louis, which is actually fairly high for us. But what else can be done to encourage and increase multifamily residential construction? I feel like it can't be a can of worms, but let's open it to Michael first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of hand in hand with the incentive conversation, I think just locally, there's been a lot written and a lot of back and forth, on, what's available, what projects really need incentives, kind of this but-for test on if incentives aren't there, what does this project look like? Is it really feasible? And I think, our region and the rents we have in our region, especially in some of these urban areas, when you compare them to other markets around the country, and especially the typically more higher desired urban markets, our rents are lower here on the whole. And so that means, when the costs are the same or more in some instances, it's harder for a project to underwrite without needing some tools and needing some incentives and needing some kind of partnership with these local governments. So I think that is a big challenge that I see outside of, costs right now being an issue, which I think will stabilize. I think just those partnerships and figuring out a way to, not necessarily come in and just turn the faucet off, but figure out a way to, again, form a partnership that works for both sides there and really benefits a long-term sustainable community development, I think are key in continuing to see this growth pattern that we've been on.
And just to add to that, having some additional incentive and financial programs. So while the low-income housing tax credit program is wonderful, it has, very limited capacity to really address all of the need in the state, since it is a statewide program. So there generally is a cap on the number of St. Louis projects that can be awarded. And then again, that just can't really address that need. Something else is, even through that particular subsidy program, it can be pretty hard to get to those most in need, those 30% AMI residents, and to make a project financially feasible while being able to address those needs can be challenging. So I know that's a gap that we've identified. We've tried to troubleshoot how to do that, but it's still it's still going to need some additional support. I think in addition to that, there's the St. Louis City Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There's also the County Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which I know is kind of in the works. But the city having it fully funded was really exciting. But obviously, more and more to grow there because of all this need. And then the final thing, just in reference to, while we do have low rents, we also have residents that just are in really high poverty as well. So just making sure that whatever we're doing around housing is paired with also really being able to build wealth and build financial capabilities and sustainability in the community as well.
Okay, so I'm going to pull a question from the audience. So when you look at St. Louis as a whole, can you talk about what you see as one of the top one or two issues for St. Louis? It's a big question.
I can start. I think crime is a big issue, and I think there's the reality of crime and where it is in our city and where we're seeing more of it. And then when you kind of spread that out and look at that on the whole of our entire region, what are the statistics there versus just looking at a small urban environment. But I think that perception and that reality and some of the things we saw even through the pandemic, as our urban areas might have been a little bit and commercial areas were a little bit quieter during the day, as an understatement, I think is scary and is something that really needs to be addressed and is something that's a big focus of and should be a big focus of current administration.
I think vacancy is, and it's obviously very connected to crime. I think that's certainly a really large issue to address. And thinking about the number of vacant units, vacant parcels that we have, and then again that need for housing, it really shouldn't be an issue in terms of in terms of the possibilities that we have here. So I'm super excited about the St. Louis vacancy collaborative. I know that's city-based. I would love to see more of that in the county as well, since I know in the county there's an initiative to maybe potentially put a land bank together, but to really be able to have a comprehensive approach to addressing vacancy as well.
I think that St. Louis historically has been plagued by a lack of inclusion, and I feel like that is something that has contributed to crime issues. But I think, sort of going back to the 2030 jobs plan, we have a roadmap for how we can be a more inclusive region, how we can facilitate growth and do it in a way that's really meaningful to our entire community. So I look forward for what's to come with that.
Okay, so one of the questions that an audience member has kind of ties into the new kind of sustainability need that was addressed in the emerging trends report. So when you think about the bottom line for building, how does sustainability and ESG kind of play into that?
I mean, I can jump in there too. I mean, I've, from a historic perspective, have really worked in these neighborhoods, especially in the urban environments, to, save buildings where possible, in these buildings that are 100 years old and built the right way. So from just a building perspective and that sustainability, I think that's been key. But I think, from a community and long-term approach, I really think it's creating the entertainment and the jobs, and the housing all together, so that you can kind of have these areas that are long-term that people want to be in. They want to live there. They want to work there. They want to, go to bars and restaurants and do all of those things in these neighborhoods. I think you really set yourself up long-term with just all of the legs that you kind of need to have that be stable.
I think that connectivity is really important. I know that was one of the priorities that was in the master land use plan in 24-1 in particular, but making sure to have, walkable, accessible communities to be able to really be able to take advantage of transit-oriented development as well, but to really also just be innovative again and to really try to, not create something that isn't going to work in your community, but to look at what are some, maybe it's currently seen as a deficit, but we can convert this into an asset. So I think that's super important as well. I also just want to note, I think we're on low battery, so I don't know if there's a charger, just in case. Hopefully we'll be fine.
Just in case. You never know.
Thank you.
The expertise lies.
Okay. We had one question come in specifically for Michael, I think, for your development and what you see for the pipeline. Do you see that there is a large market for, luxury market rate apartments? And do you think that will continue for the next coming years?
I do. I think around the country for the last 10 or so plus years, we've seen a lot of these 150, 200 unit and larger projects from a housing perspective get delivered that, have very, very highly amenitized, from pools, fitness centers, business centers, structured parking, dog parks and walking trails, and just all kinds of amenities that I think the demographic that's moving into those buildings is looking for. But we hadn't seen it in St. Louis really, I think until the last maybe 3 to 5 years. And so there's a lot of runway there, I think, that we have to catch up to the rest of the country and to a lot of the trends that we've seen around the rest of the country. And I think, you mentioned 1,500 apartment units being developed and are under construction in St. Louis. you look at other markets, and even other markets that are similar to us, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Columbus, Ohio. I mean, 8 years ago, a lot of those markets had 2,000 apartment units, being developed and brought on year after year after year. And then you look at larger markets, a Dallas or a Denver, and they've got 12,000 apartment units being. So I think there's a lot of room and there's a lot of demand for this product. We just hadn't seen the supply being delivered in St. Louis for too long, and I think now we're seeing a lot of catch up. So selfishly, I'm hopeful that continues. I think it will continue, but I also think we are, there is a ceiling to that at some point that we'll hit, and I think that could be a ceiling in specific neighborhoods that we start to hit. But I think region-wide we'll get there at some point. But I still think there's a fair amount of room left.
Great. So I want to end on a fun question. So I think that St. Louis has so many cool and exciting things that are happening, and yet we don't take a chance to really talk about it as often as we should. So I would love for each of you to talk about something that another company or organization is doing that you're really pumped about. So I was going to talk about, I, like hundreds of people, started biking during COVID and just fell in love with all the trails that St. Louis has. So I am really excited about the work that Great Rivers Greenway is doing. They just recently received a $15 million grant for the construction of that northern segment for the Brick Line, which I think is going to be a huge asset to our community. So what else should we brag about? Start with Kara.
There's so much that I could brag about in St. Louis. I feel like I could write a book on it, but I don't have to, because actually Greater St. Louis Inc. and STL Magazine put together a whole STL Made magazine that talks about a lot of great things that are going on in St. Louis. But I specifically, I think, want to talk about an organization that I've been doing quite a bit of work with, the St. Louis Fashion Fund. I don't know if you know this, but St. Louis used to be one of the capitals for fashion, really leading the charge in terms of Mrs. Young Women Juniors fashion. And the St. Louis Fashion Fund has the ambition of bringing fashion, clothing, apparel, retail, manufacturing back to the St. Louis area. And they want to do that through high-tech manufacturing. It doesn't look like it did back in the 1940s, 1950s when it had its heyday here. So that there's somebody that I've been working really closely with. It's really exciting. And I think just citing an example of a company that is an example of that, just down the street from here, Evolution STL is a high-tech knitting facility. It's really amazing. If you ever get the chance to look into it, see pictures of it, they've got all these incredible machines that I describe it as like 3D printing these knitted apparel pieces, shirts. I think that Luso is doing a collaboration with them where you can buy St. Louis Blues sweaters and scarves and stuff. So check them out. It's amazing.
I'm super excited about a few things. So Dream Builders for Equity is one, and I actually learned about them through ULI, through the READY program when they came and presented to us. But super excited about really that holistic way of really integrating youth workforce development, apprenticeships, along with being able to really revitalize homes in specific neighborhoods. Also the Green Lining Fund, so just additional incentives to be able to invest in certain neighborhoods that generally have been underinvested in. And then finally, I also wanted to share the St. Tower Grove CDC's landlord and rehabbers trainings. I was just speaking to somebody yesterday who really wanted to do her own affordable housing development, but she had one vacant parcel and was trying to figure out what to do with it. And so it can be really overwhelming with some of these, larger tax credit programs and other kinds of incentives. So to be able to have a resource that is really geared towards people who maybe are interested in investing in one property or maybe a few properties. And I think that's a really great resource for that.
Yeah, and I think there's, as you both said, there's a ton of things to get excited about and things that are ongoing, that are real, that are happening in our region. I think generally when I look back a couple of years ago to now, and then looking forward a couple of years, I think there's a lot of really exciting entertainment attractions that are happening. I think people forget how big of a tourist attraction and how big of a stimulus that is for our economy from a tourism perspective, with the Arch and a longstanding baseball team and the Blues team. And there's just a huge following from other regions that are primarily south of here, but north of here as well, that don't have a lot of those attractions. So I think you look at the Arch grounds, you look at the Ferris wheel and the aquarium. I know I've mentioned some of these already, but MLS, Topgolf, when that's able to get fully announced, the Foundry, all these things, when you put them together, it creates a pretty awesome long weekend trip, I think, for a lot of tourists to come to St. Louis. And I think that just drives a lot of good economic growth into our area. So I'm excited to see those remaining couple that are on the docket get developed and watch them come to life.
Okay, I think that kind of wraps up our program. So thank you everyone for sticking with us throughout the tech issues. Thank you for the panelists. You did a great job being flexible and changing it up. I'll take a quick shout out. Stephanie and I are both graduates of the Ready program through ULI. It's a really great resource, so please check that out. ULI is continuing to do some great work through Urban Plan, some tap panels that are really great. So please go to the website, check it out. If you have any questions, just call Kelly and she'll be able to talk you through what we're doing. So thank you to Kelly for organizing and fixing all of our tech problems. Yeah, and I hope that everyone has a great holiday. I think that's it.